Hi, boys and girls. Welcome back to Munro Live, and I'm here with Bajeev Ijaz, and Bajeev is Bajeev is from One, which is Our Next Energy, and we're at their lab to discuss a little bit today about what they've accomplished and what they're benchmarking right now. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to tell you a lot about what the future might hold, but I'm standing here with Bajeev and his daily ride. This is a Detroit Electric vehicle that Bajeev has, and actually, before we do anything else, I wanted Bajeev to kind of like give us a little impression about what's going on, because this car is unbelievably luxurious. So.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming to visit us at One. I kind of believe that in order for us to think about where we're going to go in the future, we should take a hard look at where we have been in the past. And I particularly appreciate the story of the Anderson Electric Car Company, which produced a Detroit Electric back in the early 1900s. They actually started out in around 1908 and produced vehicles all the way through till 1939. And the company actually had produced the largest number of electric vehicles of the day. One thing I didn't know is that in the beginning of the 1900s, electric cars were the highest percentage of road vehicles out in the market, primarily because they were easy to start. You could actually find a place to refuel them because you could plug them into the grid. And the grid was very nascent at the time, but it was easier than fuel at the time, so it was easier to get fuel. And then the third thing was that you could actually use them in the winter time. And so they made a market out of the electric car being a more practical vehicle. And as I started thinking about the story and the way they advertised and kind of the benefits that they described, I realized that 100 years later, we feel like we're inventing the electric vehicle market. Actually, it was invented back then, and the market actually just needed the battery technology to keep progressing enough that you could then finally resolve the dilemma electric cars have always had, which is the utility of it. It's a great product, it just needs to have the utility to take you a long enough distance that you don't need another product. And so that's what One is all about, is we're working on battery technology that can further progress on the range attribute and improve that for customers that are buying and selecting electric vehicles from today's market. But this certainly is a beautiful vehicle.
It is.
I actually love the way that they presented this vehicle to customers, which was not just a great car, but they made it so that you kind of wanted to be, a part of this type of environment. It was a closed glass cabin. It shielded you from the weather environments, unlike a lot of the other cars of the day, and also beautifully appointed.
Well, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that Henry Ford's wife had a Detroit Electric, not a Ford. So this is, and the reason is, when you come in here and you take a close look on this interior, this is suede leather with these little stitching things. The inside of this car is like staggeringly beautiful.
Yeah.
This is the car that I've been looking to try and buy an older vehicle, and everybody wants to have an old car. This is the car that I would buy if I had your money, maybe. But this is the car that I would like to try and buy eventually. I'd love to have one of these things restored. I got too many projects right now, but you bought this thing fully restored just a little while ago, I heard.
That's right. And Henry Ford and the Detroit Electric actually did cross paths. William Anderson wrote a letter to Henry Ford saying that I've serviced your wife's car, and this was in I think it was 1912. I've serviced your wife's car, had 4,950 miles from the first year, and the nickel iron battery required 90 cents of maintenance. and he made the point to Henry Ford in this letter that you really ought to give a hard look to the electric car. And so I thought that was a really fascinating piece of history back in the day. And it was not just Clara Ford, but Thomas Edison's wife and John D. Rockefeller's wife. Those were sort of the three prominent women of the day that had sort of adopted the electric car, because that crank on the combustion cars was so hard, especially in the wintertime, to start the vehicles, that the electric car really resolved that one major gap and became kind of the favorite car for many people to drive.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Many people know that I was born in Canada, and one of the houses that I restored was built in 1871.
Okay.
It had a carriage house, but the carriage house had been converted because the two old ladies that lived there into the 20s or something, 20s or 30s, they did not want to have a horse anymore. They were polluting, right? Horse pollution is stinky and can get your shoes all dirty. So they got a Baker electric.
Okay.
And when my ex-wife and I bought that house, I went inside, and on the wall is this gigantic box. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, what in the world could that possibly be? And there it said Baker Electric on it. So I thought, oh, it must be for an electric car. I opened it up, looked inside, had no clue as to what I was looking at, closed it up, and tragically took it off the wall and threw it out, because that's where my drill press was going to go. So anyway, so that was my first exposure to electric vehicles. But let's have a look at your little collection here, because this is kind of interesting. By the way, you know, there's something else interesting too. There's a group of individuals who came out and said that the first 3 months or 4 months of the first 3 or 4 months of products in service, electric cars in service, is more expensive than having an ICE vehicle. And I'm going, how is that possible? But your little story says something totally different. So the 8,000 miles and 89 cents or 80 cents of repair work, that's kind of a big story differential. But anyway,
when the early batteries were designed by the Edison company in 1870, one of the earliest batteries that I could find was an alkaline battery that was used for the railroad tracks to have signals.
yeah.
And these batteries had their potassium hydroxide solution. In order to make sure that water didn't evaporate, they had these little bottles of oil, and they would kind of replenish the oil on top. So we found a bunch of these old bottles that were just the oil that was being used to kind of help replenish the electrolyte. But around the time in 1900, 1920, that 20-year period, the Edison Electric Company started focusing on designing a battery for electric vehicles. And this battery here is the nickel iron battery. And nickel iron actually has a chemistry that's very robust to aging. At calendar life, nickel iron batteries, that even today you can find Baker electric vehicles with the original Edison batteries that operate. Jay Leno has a Baker electric that I had the fortune to drive with him, and he described the nickel iron battery as being one of those original batteries that still was operational today. And so as I found some of this early hardware, a lot of glass and jar batteries evolved into effectively a prismatic can with the nickel iron electrodes integrated. And they had an 84 volt battery in the Detroit Electric that was both located in the front of the vehicle and as well as the rear. And they would put those in modules. Some of the earliest modules, this little metal can here was actually a 6-cell module where they would put 6 of these cells in that can, close it up, and just have the wires coming out. That would basically became a module that you could then integrate into a battery pack. And so as I look at this history, I find it, first of all, important to realize we're not doing something for the first time. There's been a generation, many generations before, that have been thinking about the electric car, but the attribute that's always prevented it from being mass adopted has been range. And really that's what we're working on, is progressing batteries to beyond where they are right now.
Well, I'm kind of into Egyptology, and if you get into anything with Egyptology, sooner or later you're going to get up to one of these hieroglyphs that defies imagination. And you'll see two guys basically around a tub about this big, and it's stone, and they're stirring. And then out comes wires, and the wires lead to this big dome-looking thing like a big giant light bulb. Many of us, myself included, are saying that looks like some sort of a, sulfuric acid kind of battery.
Yeah.
Stirring it up, using, it's obvious that the poles that they're stirring with, they're also made out of some sort of rock anyway, and somehow they made a big light bulb. So
Yeah.
batteries and electricity have been around a long time, but let's talk about the thing that killed the battery.
You know, it's fascinating as
So
the electric car was sort of taking off in terms of the market. The major detriment to the combustion engine was how to start the vehicle. And when Kettering developed the 6-volt starter, and batteries actually had started becoming more commonplace because of electric vehicles, the combination of having an energy source, a battery, and then a way to electrically start a combustion engine resolved a major problem with combustion vehicles, because you actually had to have a lot of strength. Sometimes people would even break their wrist,
Break your arm.
your arm as the vehicle would kick back in that starting process. I happen to own a Model T, and I can tell you right now, the electric start was an absolute must, because when you try to start the vehicle with just a crank, it's a lot worse than trying to start an electric lawnmower, or rather a lawnmower, which is today's pull start. Now, in the Model T's case, when Henry Ford adopted the electric start around 1920, the vehicle cost had started coming down. Cadillac was the first to adopt in 1912, but as Henry Ford adopted the electric start, the cost of his vehicle was around $366 versus the electric car, which could be in the thousands of dollars. And so it was the cost of the vehicle, the advent of an easier start, and then the petroleum industry that
Catching
followed
up, yeah.
the vehicle's success that allowed then the Model T and the combustion engine to really take off.
Yeah.
And so then that became the preferred product. It became much more affordable for people to adopt these in mass.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do now, I guess, is I'm going to get a chance to talk to Tim a little bit.
Okay.
But you're going to be here to wrap up, I guess. So we got the background story from Brigitte, and now we're here with Tim Hughes, and Tim is the Senior Director for Program Development, and he's going to, and first off, thank you so much, Tim, for,
Thanks very much
for
for being
inviting
here.
us down and letting us have a look. And he's going to describe this battery pack, which is a little bit different than anything we've seen so far. So, Tim, I'll let you dive right in. And by the way, we're covered here. This has got a chunk of transparent something flexible, whatever, so you can see inside. So with that, I'll let Tim take over.
This is a high voltage pack. This is our Aries pack. It's 108 cells of lithium iron phosphate chemistry in series, about 79 kilowatt hours. What makes this really unique, Sandy, is that instead of using a modular approach that's traditional in lithium ion battery products, we've gone directly taking the cells and installing them directly into the pack to make a structural element out of the cells. And by doing that, we've achieved about 76% volumetric cell to pack energy efficiency. That's world class. What we do is we literally stack these cells in here, and we do all of the cell compression, retention, and location directly into the pack. And in the front end is the business end. So we have the energy and power end, and we have the business end. This is where our electronics reside. We call this an integrated battery management system. This has the centralized BMS for cell monitoring, as well as pack energy balancing. We have all of our electrical contactors up here. We have heater control integrated, as well as isolation monitoring and vehicle communications.
Wow, cool. And I noticed that right now it's off because we're having this little discussion,
Yeah.
but you're doing testing and whatnot.
Yes.
What would a battery pack like this? How many kilovolt hours would this?
This
would
is
say something like this.
It's 79 kilowatt hours.
So this is slightly bigger than what you'd find inside of a Model S.
Yes.
Or not a Model
it's
S,
around
a Model 3.
S.
Model 3.
A BMW i3 or a Model 3?
Yeah, the Tesla Model 3.
Tesla Model 3,
that's
yes.
that's at about 74, 75
Yes,
kilowatt hours.
it's a little
this
bit more, but you'll
bigger.
notice when you get to the Model 3 LFP pack, you're going to notice a huge difference in the volume efficiency.
So okay, now we're having a look at LFP lithium iron phosphate battery that's kind of being sold or offered to people who bought a Model 3 but are waiting for battery packs. This is a little bit different, actually a little bit different, but not much. All you can see is that it's kind of got a lower profile, but we're looking at the connections and whatnot being pretty much almost identical, but the look of the battery itself is vastly different. And you can see here that some of these connecting points that we would expect to see if we were looking at the 2170 battery packs, like the smaller cells, are kind of compared here. But the one thing that I do like about this, Tim, could you flip this back over? We'll go to the small one. We look over here, and now when we peel back, we can see that this is definitely not the same as before. So can you give us a little description here then, Tim, on what's going on?
Sure.
You know,
this is a relatively pretty slick design that they've got going on here. So they have a flex circuit for their voltage sense and temperature sense for the cells. They have the cell bus bars integrated through a lamination process with a little plastic sleeve that actually covers up including all of the high voltage connections, high current connections. They laser weld a voltage sense tab that's connected to the flex circuit, to the bus bar, all in the pre-assembly, which allows them to have that offline pre-assembled and then drop it down and do their laser welding with not too much worry for positional control on the bus bars. It's a very slick design.
well, the one thing nice here is there's on the 2170s, you've got a million little wire bonds that are going all over the place. This is a much simpler design.
It is.
Yeah. So where are these batteries coming from? What supplier?
This is coming from CATL.
Yeah. So
China.
Catel in China makes very good batteries. Actually, almost every prismatic is made in China, as far as I know.
There are some in with Exalt here in Michigan.
Yeah.
But CATL, BYDs, Wushens of the worlds, they're the major players.
So this development and whatnot, I would guess, would be coming from Catel. They import they import the batteries, but the technology to link it all together and whatnot, would that be Tesla that did that, or would that be Catel that did that?
I don't know. I'd be very interested to learn
I'm guessing it's going to be Catel, because I've been to their operations and whatnot. They've got the smartest guys on the planet for batteries. So anyway, let's just cover this back up.
Sure.
Now we're looking at, in essence, what we've been calling the electronics bay. And this electronics bay looks different. First off, it's simpler. There's not as much stuff going on. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on with this versus what we've seen in the past with the bay in other Tesla Model 3s?
One of the big differences is it's very clean. There's actual housings for their circuit boards. How they've routed their bus bars, their high voltage bus bars. This doghouse is housing their inverters as well as their battery management system, their contactors, their pyro, and all their communications. The neat thing about this doghouse is when we look at it, it's designed for assembly. It's all vertical assembly.
Yeah.
There's line connections, but it's made with all these flexible connectors.
Yeah, floating connectors, yeah.
When they bring up, they have, if we look on the modules, for making their high voltage, high current connections, those are actually on posts that are flexible.
You know, it's a funny thing. We've made suggestions like this to automotive companies in the past, and they've been.
It's beautiful.
They just reject them. I've never seen anybody really come up with something like this. Actually, we have windshield wipers and whatnot that were developed by some folks at U of M, and they ignored them completely. They better start paying attention to some of this stuff soon, because really and truly, this is the wave of the future, and everything I've seen in the past is going to be just that, the past. Just wanted to, there, okay. I just wanted to see how that snapped in there, and it does. So this does work remarkably well. I'm really impressed with this. So we said thanks to Tim, and he's given us a great overview of what they've done here and what they've looked at with the Tesla product. But I brought the Jeep back here because really what I want to do is find out what's in the future. So what have we got coming down the pike?
Well, I tell you, Sandy, if I explain to you what's in the future, you won't come back to visit us. So I'm going to save that for another day, so you come back and visit us. But we do have something cooking that's quite exciting.
Is it like nuclear? Maybe not.
You'll have to come back to see.
Okay, so we are going to be coming back. I do know a little bit about what's coming up in the future. You're going to be very excited, and but unfortunately, the guys here at One can't talk about it before they show their investors, which is always a good idea.
That's probably a good idea.
So anyways, I'd like to thank you all for watching us again, and stay tuned, especially if we're going to be coming back here to the One, and have a great day. Thanks for watching, and being as Corey is staring at me, if you want to hit that subscribe button, that would be great as well. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.